Every revolution starts in the minds of the people. Arm yourself for the war of ideas. Take back your life. Take back your liberty. Tom Mullen Talks Freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tom Mullen Talks Freedom. Today is Thursday, April 2nd, the next day after President Trump's address to the nation on Wednesday night, ostensibly to give us an update on the war in Iran. And I think a lot of people were hoping he was going to project some kind of end date. And really, we didn't get any news out of his address. And it was the usual rambling, self-congratulatory muddle. And most importantly, it was really a repeat of what he's been saying for weeks. So as far as the end of the war is concerned, he just says that it's going to be over soon, a matter of weeks, and that we've met most of our objectives. Now, as far as the objectives are concerned, we'll get to those in a minute, but he's claimed that they've met all their objectives, or they've met most of them, or at one point he said they really won the war on the first day. So though that range of statements has not changed in at least 2 weeks. So one has to just assume that we're right where we were a couple of weeks ago, with the Strait of Hormuz still closed. And we'll get to that and Trump's comments on that in a moment. And let me just say, for this entire, what seems like a lifetime at this point, it's been 11 years we've been dealing with Trump as a political figure. And there's so much that you have to excuse. I mean, he's so exhausting to listen to, with the rambling asides, the constant need to make ridiculous statements like never in the history of warfare has an enemy been defeated the way we've defeated Iran, or words to that effect. They were going to have nuclear weapons like you've never seen before. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if any of these are ad libs. He has some smart people around him, and whether you agree with their politics or not, I mean, at least they're not blithering idiots like one would assume, listening to this man who is the most powerful bureaucrat in the world at the moment. It really is terrifying. And we've looked past all that for 11 years. And I mean, some of the people who support him apparently like that style. I don't know. To me, again, the only word I can come up with is exhausting. I'm sitting through yet another speech where Trump claims that if it weren't for him, the whole country would be gone, and all of this bullshit that he's constantly slinging, hoping to get some information that's relevant. And again, it was 30 minutes that I'll never get back in my life. So there's that. On top of the fact that he's talking about one of the most colossal mistakes any president in the history of the country has ever made. Now, that is not hyperbole. That's actually true. I mean, this is a disaster of epic proportions. And, the United States has never suffered an official defeat. I mean, I don't know what you'd call Afghanistan. After 20 years, they left and the Taliban was still there. To me, that's a defeat. Most people acknowledge Vietnam as a defeat. Now, the United States military won all the battles, the conventional battles in those wars, but they lost the wars. So, but never has a war that the United States has been involved in had the potential for disaster as much as this one. Not even Vietnam, where they could have left at any time. They just kept doubling down on a strategy that wasn't working. But here we may have permanent consequences that are never reversed. But let's get to, what he actually said. Again, he said they've met most of their objectives, that they think that they'll be finished soon. He keeps claiming they're negotiating a deal. Now, immediately after this, or I should say, immediately after his announcement yesterday morning that Iran had asked for a ceasefire, Iran officially denied that anyone's talking to the president. Their foreign minister appeared on television and said quite clearly, we get some emails, sometimes directly from Washington, sometimes through our friends in the region. And I think Pakistan is the primary intermediary. And we respond when it's appropriate, and otherwise we don't. But no one is sitting down and talking with the Iranians. Okay. That's just plain a lie. And it's a lie by a desperate man who's got himself into something that he can't get out of. He wants desperately to get out of. And, maybe what you should have done was not break one of your core promises. One of the reasons, the only reason many people voted for you, which was not to do exactly what you've done here. They're not negotiating with Iran. Iran is not interested in negotiating. And I think what Americans have to understand, that it's hard to understand, is that it's not up to the United States when this war ends anymore. That's not the situation we're in. The situation we're in is it's over when Iran decides it's over. Now, you could keep bombing them, and for sure, you could bomb them for another 10 years. I'm not saying that's not damaging their country. It's doing tremendous damage. It's probably killing a lot of civilians that we're not hearing about. But they had that factored in. They knew that was going to happen. They've kind of conceded we're going to get bombed. And I mean, Trump, again, a president of the United States saying we're going to bomb them into the Stone Age and not even able to pull off the line without stumbling over it like some schoolyard idiot, like the C student in school. It's just, I've really reached the end. I'm just totally over listening to this man anymore. But in any case, this will be over when Iran's demands are met, or they feel like they've made enough of a statement and caused enough pain that this won't happen to them again. Now, again, I don't necessarily like the Iranian government. I certainly wouldn't want to live in Iran or under any of their rules. And of course, I always with the caveat that everything we know about how oppressive they are comes from the same people who've lied us into every war. So I don't know how much I have to filter out, but I'm sure it's not some, Lockean free republic or anything like that. But all that being said, that has nothing to do with their relationship to the other nations of the world. And basically, they've been the non-aggressor for all of my life. They haven't really invaded anybody in 200 years. So as far as they're concerned, they want to make sure this doesn't happen again. And what else could they do? All right. They've tried to negotiate. First of all, they signed a deal and they lived up to the deal. They lived up to the terms and the U.S. didn't. The U.S. ripped up the deal while the other European nations stayed in it. And then they came to the table to negotiate with the Trump administration. And while the Trump administration was shaking their hand, it kicked them in the nuts and bombed them in what's now called the 12-day war, where Israel ended up asking for a ceasefire because it turns out that the Iranians are not the punching bags that everybody assumed they were going to be. And Israel started running out of defensive missiles and was taking a lot of hits. And that's why that 12-day war was only 12 days long. And 6 months later, the Trump administration goes to the negotiating table and does the same thing. Okay, this is the day of infamy, what the Japanese were roundly criticized for decades after Pearl Harbor. No difference here. It's just your government that's doing it. And I would say a government that's completely lost any sense of honor. But Iran will decide when they're ready to stop shooting missiles. In addition to denying that there were any negotiations going on, they delivered a nice Passover gift to Israel, which was another barrage of missiles that Israel itself says 80% of which are getting through. So that's not a good thing either. Israel's behavior has been, Israel's government's behavior has been horrendous in this, but that doesn't mean we should be glad their civilians are being hit with missiles on any side of this war. The only ones who don't have no cost in this are Americans. And hopefully we won't have to learn the hard way what a real war is like when missiles are hitting buildings in your own city and blowing up houses in your own neighborhood. The British, there's probably a few British who remember that from 1940, but no one alive in America has ever experienced that. So, and I think that's desensitized the American population to what goes on. I mean, 9/11 happens every day in the countries the empire decides to liberate. So just think about that. But Iran's demands are more than just stop bombing us. They want reparations for the damage the U.S. and Israel has caused. They are insisting they're going to keep enriching uranium for energy and medical needs. I'm sure they're thinking hard about making a nuke. They should be if they're not. And of course, they're not giving up their missile capability. And Trump claims that it has been destroyed. Let me give you the exact words from his speech because I have the transcript here. He says, here's what I'm talking about when it's the Trump language. Victories like few people have ever seen before. Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them, terrorist regime they led, are now dead. That's exactly how he said it. What construction that sentence is supposed to mean other than they murdered their leaders while they were negotiating peace, I don't know. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons factories and rocket launchers are being blown to pieces. Very few of them left. All right, so first of all, almost none of that is true. And what is true of that is kind of irrelevant. So he says their Navy is gone. Okay, that was one of the 4 objectives that Marco Rubio claimed were the objectives of the war during the opening weeks. He says their Air Force is in ruins. Iran never had an Air Force to speak of, okay? And they really didn't have a Navy to speak of either. If you don't believe me, then review my interview of Colonel Douglas McGregor. I think he referred to it as 9 ships. He was probably exaggerating for effect, but it wasn't much of a Navy. The whole point is Iran did not invest for the last 20 years in a conventional military. Okay? As usual, the DC Empire is refighting World War II. They think if they blow up a lot of stuff and bomb and so forth, that they're doing something, and they're not. Okay? Iran invested very heavily in missiles, most of which are built and housed underground, very deep underground. And when Trump says there's very few of them left, I don't believe that for a moment. And we'll see. He said that 3 weeks ago, and they've continued to decimate military targets in the Gulf states and Israel with missiles. So when is it they're going to stop firing if they don't have a missile capability left? So he said that the objectives at the beginning of the war were destroy their missile capability, failed. Destroy their Navy, maybe. Destroy their ability to sponsor proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. That's a joke that Hezbollah is winning in southern Lebanon and doing great damage to the Israelis in northern Israel. The Houthis have now at least voiced an intention to cut off another choke point in the Persian Gulf. So there's absolutely no evidence that Iran's ability to work through proxies, to the extent they do, has been at all curtailed, much less destroyed. And then, of course, the last one was to not allow them to get a nuclear weapon. Now, we were told 6 months ago that their ability to get a nuclear weapon was completely obliterated. And, Trump again says that, they won't be able to get one when we're done with our objectives. But none of this can be verified. I don't believe that. I think, and I've said many times on this podcast, I don't know for sure, and I don't know anyone who can quantify what percentage of Iran's total capabilities are housed deep underground and what percentage were on the surface and were destroyed by the U.S. military. Is it half underground? Is it a third underground? Was it only 20% underground, or was it 80% underground? I don't know. But there's a significant capability underground. And you have to know that if they protected their missiles, their non-nuclear missiles, and that capability from being destroyed by American surface bombing, then they certainly protected their ability to make a nuclear weapon, if they have that ability. Now, just enriching the uranium is not enough. There has to be a delivery system and several other components before you have a working nuclear weapon. And even if they got one, or if they got 10 of them, as ludicrously proposed by the Trump administration, they were just weeks away. The United States has thousands. Israel has hundreds. All this would be a deterrent. And frankly, the assumption that the world would end if Iran got a nuclear weapon is preposterous to me. They have been the adults in the room during this entire drama through Trump's first term and now his second term. You remember he ran all the way up to the edge of a war with Iran in his first term, with John Bolton leading the way. So Iran having 10 nukes or one nuke or whatever is not the end of the world. I think sooner or later they're going to have them. I think the idea that you can keep countries who want them from getting them it's unrealistic. At some point in this technological age, everybody's going to have a nuclear weapon. Okay, we're just going to have to deal with that. Don't forget that the guy who issued the fatwa, which the Iranian Muslims take very seriously, that possessing or building a nuclear weapon is against Islam. The empire killed that guy the first day of the war. And now the son is much more hardline, and they're kicking around the idea, well, is it against Islam if our survival is at stake? So sooner or later, they're going to get past that fatwa. Nice work, boys. So, I mean, really, as far as the objectives are concerned, they haven't achieved any of them besides destroying their inconsequential navy. They're fighting. They think that this is World War II. They're going to march into the Capitol and, the supreme leader is going to surrender, like somebody's going to be General Patton or something. This is the childish worldview that these people have. And, so the net effect of this is that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. It's going to be closed for a while. And now Trump, realizing there's no way to open the strait unless the Iranians agree to open it. Why? Because their weapons are underground. Okay. They're not blocking the strait with their navy. They never were. If you sail into the strait and, the places that a boat can even sail are very narrow and shallow, you can't maneuver in there, you're going to get hit with a missile. It's already happened. So, or many missiles, and you're going to be sunk. And there is no military way to solve that right now. So this whole temper tantrum by Trump about the NATO allies not being there for the United States, that he said last night that the United States may not worry about the strait so much because none of the oil that goes through the strait comes to the United States. Of course, this is economically retarded, as we know. We're already being hurt because of the strait being closed. That's why oil is so high. It doesn't matter if we actually take possession of the particular oil that goes through the strait, because the people who do are now competing with us for other oil, the oil that we do import. You absolute moron. So maybe he doesn't believe that. Maybe he's just saying that as a way to get out of this. I don't know. I have a feeling personally he doesn't even understand this, but I'm sure the people around him do, and they've cooked up this. Well, that's not really our problem. Let France do it. Okay, what's France going to do that the U.S. military is unable to do? What is it if all of the European Union countries, or all the NATO countries, more specifically, sent all their ships to the region and all their planes? What would they do that the U.S. military could not do? Answer, nothing. That's why they're not doing it. So, again, this is people have been talking, even pro-Iran hawkish people have been talking about this problem for 20 years. And Trump went and did it anyway. So, basically, he came out to make this address, set the expectation that we would get some kind of new news, some kind of, update. And there wasn't any. It was just more of the same rambling we hear every time he's asked about this war. The same lies about negotiations going on, which they're not. Moving the goalposts. No longer is he talking about the same objectives. Now he's talking, we destroyed their Air Force. Okay? Which was never an objective. Totally irrelevant. And he's trying to make off that, if the strait is still closed when the U.S. walks away, that, we still won. Yeah. And I don't think the U.S. can walk away in any case. That's the real problem that Trump's facing, is he can't walk away. He might say he's going to soon, in a few more weeks. He'll be saying that in July, unless he agrees to Iran's demands. Because if the U.S. walks away, Iran can keep hitting the U.S. bases. Now, thankfully, the U.S. evacuated the troops from those bases. So basically, they're hitting, as far as I know, empty infrastructure. And as far as I'm concerned, keep on hitting it, baby. I don't want to see our troops go back to those bases. I want to see them come home. So as long as we're not taking casualties there, although I think we are taking some casualties, every once in a while you hear about hundreds of injuries, but it's very curious that hundreds of people could be killed or could be injured in a missile attack and nobody dies. I have to believe that if U.S. soldiers were dying, that we would hear about it, or the families would be saying something, but I don't know. I put nothing past the DC deep state anymore and the lies they're willing to tell. It's quite startling. I mean, I've always assumed, most of what I was hearing was either untrue or skewed, and they're even able to surprise me given that assumption. So not much more to say about Trump's speech other than it was lather, rinse, repeat. And he also claimed that this Venezuela project is going so well. And now we're working along with Venezuela and are, in a true sense, joint venture partners. We're getting along incredibly well in the production and sale of massive amounts of oil and gas, the second largest reserves on Earth after the United States of America. We're now totally independent of the Middle East. So again, okay, where's this effect from Venezuela on the price of oil? You idiot. okay? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we're independent of the Middle East, because the people who do get oil from the Middle East, once again, are competing for the oil we do buy because they're not getting it from the Middle East. And to the extent that infrastructure has been destroyed there, it's going to be a long time before supply gets back to what it was. And if Trump follows through on this threat to do catastrophic damage to Iran's oil production, and Iran responds in kind as they have promised they will, destroying the rest of the Gulf states' production capabilities, we are going to have an enormous global problem. So I'm interested, to dissenting views in the comments, and not just, no, this is going great. Why do you hate America? No, tell me how they get out of this. Tell me what happens if the U.S. declares victory and walks away and Iran keeps firing missiles, or Israel keeps firing missiles or fighting. Because Israel loses this war without the United States, and then what? So interested to hear what you have to say in the comments on the show notes page of this podcast. Don't forget, there's a video version that you can watch. I'll have a link on the show notes page to that YouTube. And if you haven't already subscribed, subscribe to both. It helps me out. It helps get the word out to more people. Like the video, like the podcast version if you're listening on Apple or Stitcher or Google Play. And please do share this with a friend. If you're not already on my email list, you can get on by going to itsthefedstupid.com, and you put in your email. You get to download a free copy of my book, It's the Fed Stupid, and you'll get some more free content several times a week. Of course, your email will not go anywhere. I don't sell them to anybody or anything like that. So please do sign up on the email list, like and subscribe to the podcast, and share this with a friend. And I'll see you very soon here on Tom Mullen Talks Freedom.
The war of ideas has only just begun. Arm yourself with the knowledge you need by heading to TomMullenTalksFreedom.com and subscribing to our email list. And remember, every revolution starts in the minds of the people.